So, hi everyone, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing. And today's episode is titled, Why Haven't We Moved On from Lead Gen? Really? And I'm saying it like that because so many marketing influencers have kind of convinced us and are talking about demand gen and how we need to focus on demand gen. But we know in practice that actually there are quite a lot of organizations out there that are still struggling to move past the lead gen and the lead volume phase. So we have brought someone very special along to discuss that with. And without further ado, Vlad, please introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you so much for having me today. I think it's an awesome topic. And my name is Vlad. I'm a co-founder of FullFunnel.io, where we work with B2B brands with complex sales, long sales cycles, complex sales, usually 50K plus annual contract value when you have multiple buyers, maybe enterprise or mid-market segment that you're after. So we help them implement demand gen and ABM programs to actually drive pipeline and revenue. That's a short intro from my side.
Amazing. Sounds like the perfect person to be discussing this with. Not that this wasn't planned. So, as we said, kind of in the intro, as Emma mentioned, marketing influencers were kind of really hot on the demand gen thing. I want to say like 2 years ago, maybe a bit more. I think I was still working for a company back then, but we've kind of stopped talking about it for now. And when we were planning this episode, Vlad was like, well, aren't we done with demand gen? Like, we're not talking about it anymore. But from mine and Emma's experience with clients, particularly, people are so not yet done with lead gen, let alone demand gen, that we thought we were going to circle back and try to explore why it is that we just can't get to demand gen. So, Vlad, from your experience, could you share with us some of the things that you think organizations are struggling with that's preventing them from moving on from lead gen?
Yeah, I mean, when we were discussing, it was indeed like, oh no, again, talking about lead gen versus demand gen, it's a topic that's been talked a lot about on LinkedIn, and influencers. But the reality and the truth is what you see with your clients, what we see with our clients as well, what you see in a majority of companies is that, no, they're still stuck with the lead gen. So why is that? Well, there's many reasons, and it kind of depends on the company. And I think like one of the most common ones is just kind of a linear mindset, like looking at, transactional sales as if you would have, selling shoes online, like some sort of e-commerce where you have an impulse buy, where you see an ad, you click through, see the product description, decide whether you want to buy it or not. But especially in B2B, especially, in the situation that we are in, like I said, complex sales, linear, the buyer journey is everything but linear. You have a lot, even B2C, like I think there was some data coming out from Google, how many searches a person does when they're buying a car and recently purchased a car can verify. It's been a long buyer journey. It's been a lot of back and forth and a lot of changing. And actually, if I look at my buyer journey there, a very, very, very small percent was on the vendor website and, talking to the vendors. And this is actually what we based a lot of our decisions on the data, that limited data that we have, right? And so a lot of people and a lot of especially executives kind of see this, okay, so we present them our product, they decide whether they want to buy it or not. So I think that's kind of the linear mindset. I think it also has to do with metrics. So what do you measure, right? Leads, that's easy to measure, easy to attribute, easy to also kind of control and report on. And so, okay, who didn't do a good job? Was it marketing or sales, right? So it's kind of like an easy model to measure as well, and then also use that to maybe make some decisions, etc., which is part of the problem. But I think a lot of companies are also kind of have this idea. This is what I've seen, especially kind of with startups or companies who have never done marketing. This maybe you could call it like product obsession. So it's like all we need to do is we need to get our message, and the message is really the description of the product features, in front of our customers, and they'll get it. In other words, they'll fall in love with our product the same way I'm kind of in love with our product, right?
I mean,
And
kind
then
of.
there is also like this, I mean, it depends, but you do have, I've met a lot of people who think like that, you know, and I mean, it's also understandable. Like they've spent probably like, you know, a good chunk of their life developing that product. Of course, they fell in love with it. It's probably an awesome product and customers love it. But of course, today in a, you know, you almost have unlimited supply, right? Almost infinite supply. So it's not easy to stand out. And then I think also there's simply like marketers who may want to suggest like demand gen programs or other way of marketing. Maybe they don't know how to connect the dots and actually explain, you know, educate, let's say, their execs and explain them, okay, how does that ungating your content and, you know, not attributing, not generating leads, well, how does that actually lead to sales? It's for a lot of people, they don't know how to explain this. And I think we cannot expect our executives to really understand that it is our job to educate them and show them how the dots connect. And then finally, I think even companies who might kind of get it and want to give it a try and might have tried it in the past, kind of give up too early. And especially like with demand gen, it takes some time before it starts to work. On the one hand, there's a lot that you need to figure out, but also it takes some time to build a demand, because demand is built over many touch points in the buyer journey. You need a good content. You need a lot of things to make it work, and it also takes time, right? And so unfortunately, a lot of people give up just before, you know, the results are coming, because what do they say? The dawn is the night is always darkest just before the dawn, or something like that.
Very poetic.
Yeah.
You know me.
I think that's such a good point. I keep explaining it to people like we're playing Monopoly here, right? It takes time to buy the streets and put the houses down. Like, you don't start getting the gains until you've actually like bought up some hotels, guys. And that takes time, and people do have a lack of patience, but it's also finding that balance, like you said, Vlad, of like not taking your foot off the gas. So the leads still need to be coming in while you're building up that demand gen engine. And I think that's what scares a lot of execs, is they just think, oh my God, then nothing's going to come in. So with that in mind, and Ruta and I have talked about this a lot, like we see this quite a lot with our clients, because some of them, you know, where their marketing team maybe isn't as mature, maybe it's like just starting up, or it's in its infancy, or maybe the team's been led by a sales leader or something like that, which is, you know, quite a common thing that we've seen in startups. What are some of the kind of practical ways that you can shift between lead gen and focusing more on demand and not scaring the shit out of everybody at the same time?
Kind of two questions in there. Like, on the one hand, you want to do it right. On the other hand, you don't want to scare the shit out of everybody. I think it's really good that you qualified like that, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to do like a big bang approach where you switch everything from one way of marketing to the other way of marketing. You're going to take a lot of risk, and at the beginning you're also going to make some mistakes, and because you've taken such a big bet, you won't get the time to actually kind of course correct, which is what you need at the beginning. Build the trust gradually, build the momentum gradually before kind of switching completely. So I think that if you want to switch, think about, how can I start small in a pilot? We always advise to start with a pilot, you know, maybe 1-2 quarters, and think small, like one channel, one content format, maybe even like one, you know, like a very small team. So actually, when you're thinking about even introducing that to the executives, your ask is not that big, right? So all you're asking is to get that pilot approved, Now, we can talk about that, how to get a buy-in. That's a whole nother topic, but let's just talk about that pilot. So like I said, like one channel, one content format of content. So let's say LinkedIn, text posts, right? It can be as simple as that. That's actually how we started. But still, what's really important is, like I said, you don't want to scare shit out of everybody, but at the same time, you want to do it right. And to do it right, it's really, really, and I know everybody's talking about it, but I'm sorry, I have to say it. You need to start with customer research. You really need to start understanding the buying journey in order to influence it, right? So how can I create content? How do I select? How can I create content that influences buyers if I don't know what their top questions are as they move through the buyer journey? How can I create content that stands out impacts the buyers if I'm trying to target everyone, if I'm not very specific in my ICP, right? You can't be everything to everyone. You need to be much more focused. Then how do I know which channels to select if I haven't spoken to my buyers, et cetera, et cetera? There's all these things that I want to understand. And there's no replacement for customer research. When I say customer research, probably the best thing to do is just, booking calls with the customers. Obviously, you can do, analyze sales calls and all of these things, analyze, best won, lost deals, all of these things to figure that out. But at the end, also picking up the phone and speaking to, let's say, your top customers. So I think that's the first thing you need to do. Now, let's say you understand your customers, you know what you should be writing about, what kind of content you should be producing, you know where the channel is. So it's really important to nail that one channel, right? So again, take LinkedIn. Why did I take LinkedIn as an example? It's not relevant for everybody, but don't start, from your website, because buyers are not on your website. And it's actually not a nice experience if, you're trying to educate me. And then how are you reaching me? Probably through some social, or maybe Google, right? But usually through social. So you're making me kind of jump through hoops. If I have to read your post, you're kind of teasing me. I have to then decide to click through. Then I'm coming on your website, waiting for the website to load, maybe clicking away your chatbot or pop-up or whatnot before I get to actually consume the content. People don't consume the content anymore like that. People want, if I'm on LinkedIn, I want to read a LinkedIn post, right? So be where the buyers are, and adapt your content to that platform, right? So in that case, like I mentioned, maybe text posts, native text posts for LinkedIn that are easy to consume, and then really want to nail that. And I think also very important is if you're starting with demand generation, the end goal is not just to educate your buyers. Obviously, the end goal is to drive pipeline and revenue. So you need to make sure also that your demand capture is actually okay before you start doing that. And what I mean by that, again, we can keep it simple, but make sure that you have, an easy to find, for example, call to action on your website, whether that's book a demo, discovery call, whatever that is. Don't make the buyers jump through hoops. If the demo or a sales call is the goal, make it easy for the buyers to book. If you got them there and they're ready to, book a call with you, make sure they can just book directly in the calendar with the salesperson or whomever. There are tools that make this easy. Maybe you have your internal qualification process or whatnot, but there are solutions for that. But always think about the buyer. Remove as many friction points as from the buying process as possible. Also make sure that whether they're a copy on the homepage or a landing page or whatnot, it's really clear. Doesn't have to be fancy, but it's really specific based on your customer research, based on what your insights are into what they need. These basic things I think need to be done well. Don't have to overcomplicate it, But if you're generating demand and it's like you have all these friction points, it's going to be really hard for people to, I mean, you're just going to waste a lot of money, in other words, and time. And then I think that once you have done this and you know the channel, etc., so you want to nail that channel. So what does that mean? That means that initially, I think, and I think that's also important, like in terms of expectation management, don't just immediately expect to have revenue results. It takes some time, right? So you need to define some sort of leading metrics or early signals that you're looking at to see whether you're getting traction, whether your content is getting traction. What could that be? It could be even just like views, comments, otherwise engagement from the right people, from the ICP. That's really important. You don't need to have, I don't know, like tens of and hundreds of thousands of views and, I don't know, hundreds of comments and likes and all these things. Just make sure that the content is seen by the right people. And then other signals you can, obviously, like qualitative feedback, people just mentioning, hey, I really like your content, or this really resonated with me. Or sometimes it could be people get on a sales call and you're talking to them and they say, hey, I saw you guys, you were posting on LinkedIn, or, I saw your podcast, whatnot, right? So this would be the kind of early signals to look for before you're trying to scale these out, adding new content formats, expanding the reach, putting a lot of paid budget on top of that, and all of the other things that you can do to kind of scale your efforts. Hope that makes sense.
It does. I think it highlights a really important point that when you stop doing lead gen, you have to start focusing on quality of the things you're doing, because you can come up with a really good title of an ebook with a really good landing page and hook, and then you collect someone's details, and really, as a marketer, like, this is really bad behavior. But after that point, things don't matter that much as far as you're concerned if you're doing lead gen, right? The ebook can be total garbage, but if you're opening up your content and you're trying to get people to engage with it, it has to be good, because literally it won't work otherwise. And I think that's the other thing that happens a lot in companies. They have this like content engine and they just produce shit and they just put it up and email it to people, and that's what they do. But they've lost sight of what's useful and what's good and what quality is anymore. And that's a hard one to decode and break out of as a team if you've been doing that for a long time.
But I think that's why Vlad's points around the ICP is so vital, right? Because that ICP focuses marketing and sales. And it's like, we're not going to waste our time in the nicest way possible. We're not going to waste our time with people who don't meet that ICP. And so it's going to focus your content, and it's going to mean that we're all aligned. It's like personally, it's like the best way to align the two teams as well, is to make sure that you've got that nailed.
I mean, I have very little to add, because I really love both remarks, right? Getting that content to resonate is perhaps not the right word. Like, it's more, again, you want to educate your buyers, you want to impact them as they move through the buyer journey. So it's more than just resonating. Maybe even like, I don't know, maybe motivational posts or even like cat videos could resonate with some buyers, but of course you want much more. You want to move the needle. And like you said, I think having that alignment starts with having alignment on the ICP, because at the end, getting that MQL that never converts, throwing it over the wall, and then blaming sales for not following up and sales blaming you for bad leads, like, this should never happen. I mean, if you have this alignment about A, who the ICP is, the lead should always be accepted, but B, also, what is the level of intent that we need to have before this lead is passed on to sales, right? Is it like them raising their hand and reaching out to you? That's one point. There are other things that you can also do. It's not just about like this kind of more passive approach. It can be a bit more proactive as well. But there, you also need to have alignment about, okay, what do we consider to be an account or a buyer that's like engaged enough for us to start, the next step in the marketing, prospecting, sales process.
Yeah. And also that's super personal, right, to who your buyer is, I think. I've recently been working with a company that sells to recruitment companies and to like recruitment MDs, and how they buy and how they navigate stuff is so different to HR people, which are, they're in the abouts in terms of the people that we're talking to. Like, they're not that different, but just their attitude and how they do stuff is so different. So yeah, going back to the customer interviews, I think that's key, right? You're never going to know unless you do that bit. Even asking them, like, where do you consume content? How long do you spend on these things? And, maybe they don't at all, and then you're fucked. But you'll you can figure that out later.
But it's such an important point, right? So it's not about, like, I hear a lot of companies, especially like technology, are selling some sort of technology that has a lot of use cases, can be applied in a lot of different industries, right? And you say, my solution is industry agnostic. Yes, it is. But the way that your buyers are is not. That's exactly what you said, right? So, I mean, who do these buyers follow? Where do they spend their time? What kind of content they're consuming? It's very different. I don't know if they are, a quality manager in a manufacturing company, or spend majority of their time on the shop floor, right, with the workers there, compared to maybe that HR person, in the office, maybe hanging out also on LinkedIn because they're interested in recruiting people. I don't know, right? But it's going to be very, very different. They're going to be also following different people, although both of them might use, I don't know, whatever productivity software or whatever it is that you're selling.
Yeah, I typically find that companies that have the most agnostic softwares find it the hardest to get going in the beginning, because we can do everything for everyone. It's like, well, that means you don't do anything for anyone really, and getting them to niche down is sometimes scary because they don't want to put their eggs in one basket, but it's the only way.
It's FOMO all the way.
Yeah. So speaking about the other side of things, so we spoke about how to practically move over to lead gen. How do we then not scare the shit out of everyone? And we kind of covered it by doing do small experimentation, but let's say you're ready to take it bigger. So LinkedIn worked out and that's good, and you want to go balls to the wall. How do we sell that in without freaking everyone out and still, functioning as a marketing team?
I think even getting the first the buy-in for the first pilot, right? Let's say, it's not going to be easy, right? So I think this applies also to people who are just starting, right? So how do you get that buy-in? Well, I mean, this is a problem that we have as a consulting company, right? We need to get a buy-in from our customers who are in a similar mindset, and maybe they're marketers, have been following us and have this idea already, but still they are not signing the check. So we have seen this many times. And so the process that we use usually is the following. So the first thing we do is we make sure that everybody is aligned on how the success looks like, or in other words, like, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve here? What are the challenges that we see right now? So, okay, so we want to drive more net new revenue. There has been a slowdown, whatnot, right? So there's like some business objectives behind it. And the biggest challenge that we see is that, like, maybe like you mentioned, we're driving a lot of MQLs, but they're not converting into sales qualified opportunities. Our sales and marketing are not aligned, etc. So this is the first kind of discussions that you want to have, and to really get everybody looking in the same directions, both in terms of what we want to achieve. And so we are not talking about demand gen at all. We're just talking about kind of more business side of things, and their perception currently of their sales and marketing, and what needs to be fixed, and what kind of outcomes do they want to drive. So this is like the very start. And the next point is about what I think Emma mentioned, was about getting the alignment on the target market. And the way that we do this usually is just starting with the revenue analysis and just looking where we got the most revenue, how can we break it all down, how can we segment our market based on things like, you know, the total revenue we generated, but also things like, you know, the deal size. Maybe some markets don't have as many customers but are much nicer because we have a much, you know, higher deal size, or customers stay longer, or they, you know, we have the best case studies because the customers really love our product, or we don't have so much competition, whatever, you know, your criteria are. Like, and then that's how you're like starting to align on the target market, but then also studying deals and understanding, like studying the actual customers, whether these are like the biggest customers, the fastest one customers, whatever, deals essentially, and then starting to really list criteria, like characteristics, in other words, like how does that, you know, ideal customer look like, and having that alignment. So why? Because your goal as a marketer is going to be, on the one hand, to present whatever initiatives that you want to present in the context of those goals and challenges, right? Because, I mean, this is how you speak their language, right? So you need that information. And then also, if you're just going to present it in an abstract way, it's going to be much more difficult than if you have this like clear alignment. Okay, so we target market. This is how we got those customers. And by the way, look, all of these initiatives, they didn't really bring us, you know, the ROI. So what I'm suggesting is, you know, building what worked, but kind of tweaking it here, etc. So I think like that's why we want to start with that analysis. And then next, I think when you're presenting whatever you're presenting, you know, for example, that pilot for LinkedIn or a bigger demand gen program, right? You want to connect the dots. We know who our target accounts or target buyers are, right? So what we're going to do here is how we're going to generate awareness and demand. We're going to share content. Why this, you know, how do we know which content, etc.? Oh, but because we have done this research, we know, right, we know what the questions are that they have. So what we are going to do is we are going to create content that answers that questions. How are we going to share that content? Okay, this is how we're going to do it. How are you going to make sure that the buyers see that content, right? So, okay, so now we know how we are going to generate awareness. So, okay, what happens next? Well, maybe we need to work with sales to, on the one, like this could be one option. We need to work with sales to turn the engagement into conversations. So based on engagement with our content, we are going to reach out to them and start conversations. We are going to maybe do some retargeting, whatever, right? So how are you going to move your buyers? So I think this is really important to present the full framework than just, you know, one little piece of the puzzle. And then finally, also have an idea about what you can expect in terms of results. And, you know, I said maybe look at the campaigns or whatever programs that you've run in the past that weren't that effective, and then say, okay, this is what we expect. Okay, we don't expect miracles. At the beginning, we are going to look, you know, for example, how many target accounts are we engaging, how many conversations we are starting, what could be the early signals. But essentially, if this is working, I expect to have these kind of results compared to the old way, like the new way compared to the old way. And then, again, all you're asking at the beginning could be, for example, to get that buy-in, to get that pilot, right, to prove. I think it's going to be a much easier sell than, of course, going for the big ask. Now, you asked also, how do you like move on from there? Well, how do you move on from the pilot? The first thing you want to do is you want to turn a one-off thing into a repeatable thing. So you want to turn that pilot into an evergreen process. So what do I need to operationalize it? What do I need? Do we have the processes and the content, whatever we need in place, so that if I repeat that, I'm getting similar results? Okay, because before you have that, it's impossible to scale. Next, okay, how can you scale this out? Well, you can scale it out obviously by, maybe involving more people, upping the budget, right? So all these things. But you can also scale by adding new types of content, right, on that same channel. For example, a lot of the content that we are sharing on LinkedIn is repurposed. So initially, these were just text posts. Then we started doing carousels. So each and every text post that I ever did that worked well, that's important, that worked well, now became a carousel. And you can then add other kinds of formats, etc. You can involve other people, right? Now, I think just to give you the vision where you want to go to, right? What you want to go to, and this is what we have implemented, is kind of an omni-channel or a multi-channel, always-on nurturing in demand gen. What do I mean by that? So, or maybe let me put this much simpler. So you have to have some sort of a demand gen calendar. Okay, that's probably simpler. So, for example, how our calendar looks like. So we do a LinkedIn post each day, each working day, and it's original content. This is what we're doing, and we are engaging the target audience every day. We also have our community, and in that community, we also share some content and do some engagement and discussions every day. Then every week, we do a live podcast interview with industry influencers. It's live, so we bring people on from the community, and otherwise they're engaged. We do every month webinars where we go dive deeper and share our frameworks. We have also about monthly, also in-depth guides and articles that we publish. We have our summit, which is kind of a conference where we parlay all these relationships that we built during these podcasts, partner webinars and whatnot, into this conference, etc., etc. So you want to grow, and we also have, I forgot, we actually have two weekly newsletters, one for our community and one for our own brand, for Full Funnel. So what is really, it sounds like a lot, especially when you know it's done by two people, but a lot of the content is repurposed. So now we know from LinkedIn, we know what is resonating, what people really like. So I'm not just going to invest a lot of money in long-form content without knowing what's already, what people are actually interested in learning, right? So that's like that part. A lot of our, for example, newsletters, it's kind of repurposing, again, the best performing content, but kind of expanding on this, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things you build out gradually, one by one, right? And the most important thing in this is that consistency, we all know about consistency, but the only way that you can get to that consistency is if you build it out one by one, and if you really just focus on operations. Like a lot of marketers are trying to kind of get things out in a perfect. Okay, I'm going to do this piece of content. I just want to make it super good and super pretty and whatnot. And it's like, but then the problem is you can't keep doing that every week. Like if you want to, for example, get a new episode out every week, for example, like we do live, well, we don't edit any episode. We just do them live and we just immediately stream it on YouTube, and then somebody just uploads it on Spotify and all these other platforms. That's it. That's our production process, right? The reason we do this, okay, once we have a little bit more, as we are growing, of course, we're going to start to improve all of these things. But the most important thing was nailing this process so that we can keep repeating it. The same thing is for, we are committed to this calendar, but done is better than perfect. And you can never make it perfect. The only way to make it better is by doing it continuously and getting this feedback from the market, et cetera, et cetera. So does that answer your question? I'm not sure. I kind of went into...
It absolutely does. I think it hammers home the point that, lots of this is kind of experimental and that you've got to test stuff and you've got to see if it works. with sort of safe parameters around it as well, so you're not just going, as Ruta lovely like kindly put it, balls to the wall straight away. I'm really interested to know though, Vlad, because I think quite a lot of the internal pushback when you start talking about this stuff is always from, I mean, I'm not saying it's always from sales, but how does it work for your sales function? Because I'm interested to see how like what the activity you do is dovetailing to your sales team, so they don't feel like they're lacking anything by not having like hundreds and thousands of pointless leads to follow up with.
Can you just kind of clarify what exactly do you want to know when
So
it
like
comes to sales? Can you...
Yeah, how does that work with your sales team? So obviously the focus is on creating that demand. So when people come through, naturally, I'm assuming they are coming through, they're just booking straight in the diary with sales. What's the experience like for your sales team based on the marketing activity that you're doing?
Okay, I think there are kind of two important points. I mentioned at a certain point that especially when it comes to selling to kind of enterprise or larger customers, especially, you can't just do the passive demand gen and waiting, passively waiting for the leads to come. Like that's really important. And for that, you actually need to work with sales. So let me just quickly explain what I mean. What your demand generation activities do is they create a pool of engaged accounts, companies. And you need to kind of have, obviously, some sort of a filter on ICP. Do those engaged accounts match our ICP? But also engagement and intent threshold. So, for example, if somebody comes to my website and they read a blog post and they bounce after whatever 1-2 minutes, well, that's not the same level of intent as, for example, if I have a company where 3 or 4 people have been coming and visiting high intent pages, like your product page, feature page, pricing page, where some of them have been, for example, attending your product oriented webinars, engaging with your brand or your people's content on LinkedIn, et cetera, right? So you need to somewhere define and align also with sales on when do we consider an account engaged enough so that we should start working on them also from kind of a sales development function. And then the next thing there is also like, okay, what should sales do at that moment, right? If they haven't booked a meeting yet, what should sales do? And there we work a lot with SDR, like with sales development, to the best approach that we found work is social engagement on LinkedIn, right? So kind of, I don't like the term social selling because it's not really selling, it's sort of about building relationships. But it's kind of, the way that you can think about it is always offering the buyers an opportunity to take the next steps while leaving them in control, right? So like if I meet somebody in a bar, I'm not gonna ask their hand in marriage, right? So I'm not gonna propose marriage there. That's not appropriate, right? Yet we somehow do this all the time in mail and on LinkedIn. Like, so what is the best outcome that I can hope for? Well, maybe to get a coffee or whatever. I'm not going to stretch that metaphor because I'm going to get in trouble. But what I wanted to say is that, okay, so somebody maybe has engaged with content. So you need to also teach sales that, okay, what is the appropriate? Well, maybe you can start having conversation about the topic that the content was about. Maybe you can offer them more resources about that topic. So somebody has engaged them on a post where I shared some stuff about ABM. Well, okay, maybe I can start conversation about, do they have an ABM motion, or is there something they're planning to do, right? They can have a very relevant conversation that can eventually, if they're buying, can progress into, a discovery call. So that's kind of the other part. Now, you asked another question. I just kind of want to cover it all, and it's going to be quick, about the experience of sales when you really have generated the demand and they are now booking the calls. Now, it's amazing. It's amazing because, they've done their research you haven't like tricked them, reached out to them, call, and kind of not really sure why they're getting into this call, but they're kind of curious. And right, so that's kind of one extreme. And the other one, where they have been maybe following your brand for 6 months. They know what you're all about. They know they're completely bought into your approach. You have actually influenced their purchase criteria. You have actually when it comes to whatever solution, let's say in our case, like ABN Consulting, here is what a lot of vendors get wrong. And they all they're kind of indoctrinated, right? So they all know that. And so what happens in effect is that very often, for example, in our own experience, we don't have competition. Like when people book a call with us, 8 out of 10 probably we are the only ones that are considering at that time, right? So it's more a question of whether we are a good fit, whether this is something that do they have internal resources in order to be able to implement what we'll teach them and all of the other stuff that they need to decide about. But it's not about whether it's us versus, which is like the best possible outcome you can have. And even if you're in our market is super competitive, but let's say, more like kind of software, etc. So not only getting into the consideration set, and being considered, but also, like I said, having with your narrative, with your, influencing the purchase criteria, so that you are actually stacking the odds in your favor to close the deal. So deals should close faster. You should have a higher close rate, a win rate, and just also a much more enjoyable experience for both the buyer and the seller.
I think that will make sense. It's sometimes hard to convince, especially sales leaders, that will be the way when they've been so used to being in control of, whipping the salespeople to go and follow up with every single lead that comes through. So yeah, it's definitely a journey there.
Well, I'll be honest. Whatever you say, you won't change their mind. So whatever you say to salespeople, they will still be thinking. I mean, the best outcome could be like, okay, fine, prove it to me. I mean, basically that's the best you can hope for at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And, because they're thinking, and rightfully so, well, what do you know? And I've been selling this product for how many years? How many times have you sold this, right? What do you know about, what I'm doing? It's like, it's to a lot of them, it might sound naive, too good to be true, whatever. It doesn't really matter. At the end, even the best story, you still have to prove it. Really important for sales is not to have like weird expectations that they will be like, oh yeah, let's go for it. But, best outcome is, okay, we'll give you kind of a chance, prove us that this will work. And I think this is also why you want to focus in a pilot and then showing that traction. And the moment you can actually show that maybe you have been working with one salesperson, you need to choose also, like, think about like a champion or a change agent, whatever label you want to put on them, but somebody who is kind of more forward thinking, who sees that maybe as an opportunity, etc. Like, if you can work with them and help them get better results, it's them and just their example that is going to convince the other salespeople to join in, etc. So it's not going to be, your presentation or even like the results of your pilot, but it will be that maybe one salesperson that you helped maybe close more, close larger deals, close faster, whatever it is that you help them with that will impact the other ones.
Find yourself an advocate.
Always.
Or make yourself one, rather.
Yes. Work hard to make yourself a champion or advocate. Yeah. Ambassador.
So thank you, Vlad, for talking to us. As you said, this has been a super fast episode and a kind of a digestion of how to get your demand gen efforts going if you haven't already. And we really, really, really enjoyed having you here. So thank you. Vlad has also given us a bunch of posts which are super useful. So we're going to link that in the show notes so you can go check them out. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.